wonderful Brad Tonini in the virtual house discussing selling in the new world. In this session, he will cover how selling in the next decade and beyond requires a new mindset, how to build a client acquisition strategy when people are risk adverse, how to create a blended account servicing mindset, and creating the must-have tools for selling success. Brad has had over 18 years of running his own business. As a sought-after sales strategist, he has helped thousands of business owners, sales managers, and salespeople increase their sales quickly. His clients are from a range of industries such as Jayco Caravans, Optus, John Deere, and a host of small to medium-sized companies. Brad is the founder of the Trusted Advisor Selling Institute, a business dedicated to increasing sales results using the Trusted Advisor Selling Method. He's also an author of 13 books and audio and video programs. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. Brad, I'll hand it on over to you.
Oh, what a pleasure. Great to be here in your virtual house, as you call it. I love that. Today we could talk about a ton of things under this heading of selling in the new world. What I've done is I've prepared 8 main points I wanted to make today. But Kate, as you will know, I'm a high content speaker, which means that I can't help myself in that there are all the way through this presentation some tools for the toolbox. Now, feel free, write these things down as we go along, and also happy to jump on and answer some questions as we go along too. So let's allow for at least 3 times at least that we can actually have these conversations and find out what's on people's minds and how I might be able to assist in terms of selling in this new world. So let's talk about the selling in the new world. It's a whole new world out there. And the thing we don't know, of course, is the impact upon our own business and also upon others' business. We can't assume anything. Some businesses have certainly felt a major downturn, but I've also got a stable of probably around 5 or 6 clients right now that are up on the previous year. They're either in an essential service like in a telecommunications company. Printing has been doing pretty well for a company I've been working with. People who are doing anything to do with masks and respirators and things. Absolutely. I mean, there's been a whole range of different people who are doing pretty well and others that are decimated. In other words, total change in the way they do things, and they're having to do what we call pivoting, isn't it? So today what I wanted to do is talk about these changes and what that means for us as salespeople. Now, as Kate mentioned, my whole philosophy is a trusted advisor selling philosophy. And what I mean by that is that I believe that we need to be trusted advisors in order to really serve our customers, but also build long-term relationships, which spins off into referral business. And that's going to be one of my principles I'll talk about today. We know these things to be true right now. Number one is we know that our buyer right now may be a little risk averse. In other words, not wanting to spend a whole heap of money with us right now, which is understandable. We also know that it's hard to get face-to-face. If you're interstate, yes, maybe you're doing a bit of that now, but Victorians, no, and none of that. And that's been one of the biggest challenges I've been hearing as well. So as we're talking about these challenges, feel free again to throw some ideas in the chat box or questions you've got, and I'll come to it when I get a chance to have a break in the actual deck today. So challenges. The whole range of challenges with regard to how we're juggling things at home too, of course. And so let me share my screen with you, and I'll bring up some ideas for you today that you can take advantage of and make some notes as you go along. So when I talk about this selling in the new world, I talk about this idea with my clients that obviously we've moved from this face-to-face mindset, this face-to-face ability to engage our clients, which is the way in which we've typically sold as salespeople, business owners in the small business market, to this virtual world. And that means that we're not able to necessarily get all the nuances we get in the sales world by meeting face-to-face and having a conversation. But virtual servicing has also created some real pluses, and we'll talk about that today too. There is a silver lining to all this, and that's certainly something that I think we need to be aware of too in 2020, that there's been some really nice benefits. We're juggling, let's face it. And as salespeople, business owners who are selling their wares in the market, we're having to juggle a lot of stuff right now. Family commitments, and in lockdown in Victoria, of course, it was even more so because we're talking about homeschooling. I've got two 11-year-olds and a 16-year-old, and that meant for periods of the day during lockdown 1 and into some part of lockdown 2, I really had to put a lot of those business presentations I would normally be making on hold. My business is face-to-face, doing business presentations, coaching, mentoring, training salespeople and sales managers. So this has been a shift, and we've all experienced this in some shape or form, especially if you're Victorian-based today on the call. How do we juggle that? But then again, of course, there is a silver lining attached to that. And the silver lining is that we're learning more than we ever learned about our kids. We're getting involved in their education. We're asking questions about what they're learning. We're finding out things that are aha moments for them. And these are all really nice things to be happening in our life. And I think we will look back on this in some ways and have a fondness around that specific thing. But from a sales point of view, how do we crank up the sales machine? And our conversation today is really all about what are those distinctions? What are those things that we need to focus on that are going to make the difference in terms of us being successful in our selling efforts for the rest of this year and moving into 2021? So, Kate, what I'd love to do is to see what questions people might have at this point around the biggest selling challenge they have right now. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a minute and let's see if we can get any questions. So anything in the chat box or any questions that people want to ask. And one person just asking if the volume can be increased. I think I don't know if that's your end or my end, but I've just at the max at my end here. Questions, thoughts around selling challenges. Keen to know if anyone's got anything they want to type in now, or can they open up their line, Kate? I'm not sure, and ask the question. I'm keen to take anything you like.
They absolutely can. If you'd like, I can unmute you and bring you on as a panelist to ask your question to Brad. So just raise your hand and I'm happy to do that. Unfortunately, Shivendra, I think it is, I'm hearing Brad loud and clear. If anyone else is having a problem, please mention it in the chat box. But otherwise, you might need to increase the volume on your side of things.
Any questions at all if you've got something around a selling challenge right now that we can talk about today, just to see what sort of things are on people's minds?
Hey, Brad.
All right, Shivendra, if you'd like to.
Shivendra.
Yeah, hi, how are you today?
Thanks very much for organizing this. Really appreciate that. Look, I'm just starting up new on the selling online. It is basically digital courses online. So I just want to know how to basically engage during the initial webinar, and attract audiences, right audiences to the webinar so they can get benefited during the process. That's one of my questions around selling online challenges.
Let me answer that two ways. First one is that we need to attract obviously people into our world, and then we need to build what I call an ascension program. An ascension program is where you experience someone for the first time and then you say, okay, I want to know more about them. I want to get an ebook from them, or also be on the next webinar or engage their services. So the first webinar is how do we actually get people into that funnel? And that's a lot to do with whether it be LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Facebook Live, or a whole range of things to get them involved. Database and working through other people's databases in terms of introductions would be another way. But once you have them, is how do we then engage them? And so one of the things we need to do is to make sure that we've got a place to go at the end. In other words, something that they can then go to and experience the next step in the process. Now, I have got a few things that I will talk about today under that topic. So I'll leave it there only because there's more to come for you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. Anyone else with their hand up, Kate? Or are we good to go?
We are all good to go.
All right, I'll go back to my screen. Off we go again. Just want to make sure that people get what they need today, Kate. So if people have got screaming questions, that's fine. Happy to be flexible, take the questions and be of help to people. So I talk about this idea of new selling. And new selling to me is a series I put together, which was all about interviews to do with sales and the environment that we live in right now. There are a number of these interviews that I ran. I was talking to experts about what they believe is really different about the selling environment moving forward. And from that, I've now just about finished my next book, which is all about selling the new world. And what I'm really focusing on are some key things around retooling our selling efforts. I think we need to be retooling our mindset, retooling our strategy, and retooling our skills. This is a great time for us to get better at selling. And one of the things is that, and I think it might have been Wendy who put this into the LinkedIn the other day about activity rates, or increasing activity won't necessarily do it for you. Kate, was it you or Wendy? I can't remember, but one of you put a little post up about that on LinkedIn.
I think that was Wendy. Definitely Wendy.
Yeah, I think I noticed it about the idea of activity, and she's absolutely 100% right. In other words, to think that we just need to increase our activity and that's going to get us more sales is just not the way to approach the market right now. We have a challenge as salespeople, and the challenge is this, that we walk a fine line right now between being at service to people and asking for the opportunity to serve them in terms of becoming a new client. So we need to walk that fine line. And I've seen sales seminars from the US and other places where people are talking about, getting out there, just talking to as many people as you can, create as much activity. I think we need to be good at our activity, but really good at our effectiveness in terms of strategy and tactics to be able to be at service and walk that fine line. So here's 8 ideas for you today in terms of distinctions of what I call great sales achievers. I think that when we're retooling our selling efforts, we have to think about what things are going to need to be in our toolbox now and moving forward to be able to be very effective as a salesperson in our own business. Here's number 1, changing our thinking. I think we are talking about a new set of circumstances. We're looking for new results, new mindset. And what comes out of that, of course, is what I talk a lot about is the road to relevance. And I think this is where the market's at right now. If I'm a buyer of your services or prospective buyer of your services, I want to know that you're relevant to me. In other words, is your message right now something that I could be interested in, something I could be interested in buying? And that means that as salespeople in our own business, we have to repackage, we have to rebundle, and we have to think of new products and services that are relevant to this new market. Are you being relevant right now is really the question I'm asking a lot of sales teams, because for us to operate as we always have and hoping that that's relevant is not going to cut it in the new world. I talk about a spirit of service. We've had a spirit of service up till now where we've all connected. We've been jumping into LinkedIn and saying g'day to each other. We've been using Sales Navigator, but also emailing and voicemailing our clients and prospects. I mean, it's been a fantastic time for us to be able to connect with people. The question is how to take that next step to actually make that then into a confirmed piece of business. And so we need to have the spirit of service and then segue ourselves and walk that fine line to be able to create opportunities. In the spirit of service, it's all about sincerity and generosity and connectivity and credibility. These are all the things that I think we've experienced in the last 6 months in terms of being at service for others. And we shouldn't lose that. That's been a wonderful piece of silver lining with all this, is that how we actually have been able to engage and help each other, looking out for each other. I don't know about you, but I found that certainly reaching out to people on an email, old clients, new prospects, and just saying, how are you? How are you getting on? What's your biggest challenge? People are responding. I've never seen people more responsive than ever who are people I already know. People who already trust me, know that I'm there as they're being their trusted advisor or sounding board. And they love to receive some positivity as long as we're being respectful of where they're at first in understanding their circumstances. As I said before, some are doing better. Some are doing okay and juggling between home and work. And some people in businesses where they may have lost their job or they're having to retool their whole business to meet the new requirements of the marketplace. We walk this fine line between service and selling. Here's the first one for your toolbox today. How relevant are you being for your customers right now? And my question around this is this. Have a think about it. What would you need to be offering your customers that you're getting fed back from the market now that is relevant to them? In other words, let me give an example. Obviously, my business, a lot of speaking, mentoring, coaching, and training. And a lot of that is face-to-face. My business has gone through a shift in the last 10 to 12 weeks. Now really coming on strong with a lot of sales teams coming back into a virtual world, which has been great. It's opened up my market, not only national sales teams, but also international, which has been great. But I've had to retool. I've had to change my offering. I've had to bring in some new products. One-on-one coaching has become very popular. One-on-one sales manager, business owning coaching has become very popular. What does that mean? Those things weren't necessarily being offered on the same scale 6-12 months ago that they are now. My question to you is, how relevant are you being to your customers right now? Your offering, your bundles, your pricing. Have a think about that. And the only way that you can get the feedback to that is to ask them. Ask them, if I was to put together this, if I was to produce that, would that be of interest to you? The best question you could possibly ask at the moment, would that be of interest to you? Once we get a yes response to that, we build the package. So we reverse engineer from the market based on what they are telling us. Hope that helps. Number 2, virtual account servicing is here to stay. We've got used to Zooming. We've got used to doing virtual account servicing. A lot of people that I work with in business are saying, hey, virtual account servicing is a pretty cool thing. In other words, we can get through a lot of account servicing calls with our clients in a way that's so productive. It's efficient and effective. A 45-minute servicing call to an existing customer on Zoom can be a long time. What would you have done in the past? You may have turned up, had a conversation, coffee, By the time you got there and got back, it could have been 2.5 hours to do a regular service call. Now, what I mean by that is simply that I have clients in the financial planning area, and part of their business is quarterly coaching. Well, now it's all virtual servicing, quarterly coaching via Zoom. Why wouldn't they continue that offering? Kate and I were just talking before we started today about changes in our offerings. And I think that everyone needs to be flexible enough to go, hey, the virtual world, the virtual account servicing, the webinars and the ability to coach and mentor and things like that. If you're in a service business, why couldn't I be doing that by virtual account servicing? And the sales teams I work with, certainly this has been a major shift and a breakthrough, and it's been a good thing. The only question you've got to ask yourself is the experience itself that you're giving people. I think to be able to just say, I'm going to turn on my screen and I've got stuff going on everywhere is not the professional way we want to appear. We're going to have to make some effort to make sure the experience is in keeping with our brand. Here's your next question for the toolbox. If you're making notes today, I want to give you 8 things for the toolbox. Number 2 is where does it make sense for you to keep a virtual offering in your business right now? In other words, what would make sense for you in terms of your clients and people you serve to have a virtual part of your offering, to be able to say, that's really part of what I'm going to do ongoing. I did a course a little while ago, about 4 months ago at the University of New South Wales, and I did a full day on counselling and I did a full day on psychology. Now, these are just areas I was really interested in. Full day on Zoom, did breakout rooms, the whole bit. I loved it. I had a great time. But I thought to myself, if you can keep me engaged for 8 hours on Zoom, you're doing really well. But they broke it down into different exercises, got role plays happening. The point is, the university was not offering those short courses on Zoom up until then. I don't know how they're going with it, but I could see to probably at least 20 people on the call with me for that 1-day program that I did with them. Here's number 3. I'm going to stop in just a second to ask you something around this. Collaboration is the new way to build business. I really believe this. I think that we are in the business of collaboration selling. And what I mean by that is we've got to get really good at making deep connections to our clients to be able to create referrals, introductions, alliances, and communities. This will be critical in terms of our ability to build business. One of the things that people are feeding back to me all the time is, I can't get face-to-face with my buyers right now. I can't get face-to-face with my clients right now. And even if Victoria opens up, and if some of the people on the call today are from Victoria, we know there's going to be people who are going to be averse to just necessarily saying, hey, come on into my office. I don't mind. Yeah, come and talk to me about what you got. And not going to happen that fast. So the point is, to build our business, we're going to have to get good at referrals and introductions, building alliances and building these communities. You know, Joe Girard is the Guinness Book of Records best salesperson that ever lived. Now, someone said to me the other day that he's been beaten now, but I'm going to take it on face value that Joe Girard was still, if not the best, one of the best. He sold 13,001 cars out of a Chevrolet dealership in the USA over a 15-year period. Now, that's pretty good going. If you work that out, it's around about 800 cars each and every year. Now, the great thing about Joe Girard was that he sold all his cars via retail, not fleet car sales, but all retail. And that's good going. He was a machine. He was able to outsell pretty much all the other 7 guys on the car lot that he was selling, and this is going back decades. Every month, his sales would equal what the other 7 or 8 would actually do in a given month. That's how good he was. People would walk for miles to go and see Joe Girard. They'd tell his friend that they're friends about Joe Girard. Here's the point. He was the master at referrals. And if you read any of his books, and I implore you to go and get one of his books, Gerard, you'll find it on Amazon. There's plenty of books he wrote. But one of his core philosophies is this idea of how many people do you know and how do you build referrals. Now, the interesting thing about referrals is that it's a mental game. And the question I've got for you here, and I'll stop at this point and just take it off by sharing my screen for a second so we can open it up. My question here is, how do you feel about referrals? And if you want to drop me a chat note or just open up your line and have a quick chat and ask me a question. Here's my question. How do you feel about this idea of asking people you know who are clients of yours and who already trust you and like you for other introductions into people that they know? In other words, refer as in they give you a name and a number and tell you about that, or maybe it's a fair income email handshake where they actually copy you into an email and say, hey, you should know about Brad. He does these things. And all of a sudden you're off and running. How do you feel about that? I'm really keen to know. Most times I ask the question, I get a broad range of response, but I'm keen just to get any sort of feedback on this one.
Yes, please drop your initial reaction into the chat box, because my initial reaction was nervousness. I feel like there is a psychological block for some reason in kind of asking for help from other people. That's what it feels like. There was a question just while people pop in their answers.
I'm just looking at it now, actually, yeah.
And they said, how do you see the virtual online world applied to retail in the near future?
I think there's going to be there's going to be a continual offering at retail of obviously face-to-face and online. The thing about the online thing is it's actually value added and increased sales in certain businesses that they never had. So why would you ever want to go back and not be offering it? I think you'd be continue to be offering 2 different offerings, because at the end of the day, that'll create exponential growth in your business. So I think that's actually, Kate, been one of the big things about this whole pandemic is the idea of how we can sell our products and services. I mean, why not have this side-by-side offering at retail?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've kind of been given an opportunity to stretch our ability in one area and practice it over and over again, and then we'll be able to kind of bring it back into the new normal.
Yes.
Wendy said referrals are gold, but you need to be specific on what a great referral looks like. But does anyone, I think the question was like, how does it make you feel?
It's funny because I know Wendy's a master of this as well. And she does this all the time. She just introduces people and knows people. But the point is that she's right. You know, who's an ideal client for you? And if you're going to build a toolbox around referrals, be specific as to who you want to be referred to, because you'll get referrals that are no good to you. And there's nothing worse than people giving you referrals and you're going, now I'm going to tell this person that these people are just not my sort of referral. So be specific.
That's great. That's a really good point. But yes, and anyone, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like, if you prefer to speak as opposed to pop something in the chat box. More than happy to take you off mute.
All right. Why don't I keep moving, and then I can always catch back up on some other questions in the next break there, Kate?
Perfect.
All right. Off we go again. I hope this is helping in terms of breaking this down into a toolbox for you today to be able to give you things that you can take away and use. And I want to make sure this is really roll your sleeves up and get some value, some meat and potatoes out of the conversation today. There is a mental game of referrals. And this is what I was alluding to, is that people feel uncomfortable at asking for referrals. As Kate said, I think it's a bit of an Aussie thing, to be honest with you. I've got a lot of friends in the US and a lot of people that I go and see when I go to the US who are other speakers. And I see the US as being very different. People are almost brought up with the idea of asking for referrals and introductions, but here we feel very uncomfortable. Maybe it's because we feel we're too pushy. Maybe we don't want to get rejected. And maybe we just feel like we're cheapening our self-image. There could be a whole range of things around that. All I can say at this point is that if you're looking at the new world and how you're going to retain and get new clients, of course, you're going to have to get good at referrals and introductions, because it's going to be harder to get face-to-face with new buyers for some time yet. So let's take that on board and go, okay, how do I produce qualified leads? Referrals is all about transferred trust. Once someone really likes you, trusts you, thinks you do a great job, they'll refer you on. They'll actually feel really empowered to want to do that, to be honest with you. But it's also about communities. And if I look at, what I put out a trusted advisor selling world with a whole range of different events and offerings, Friday schools of sales and webinars. And certainly if you want to get involved in anything I'm doing, my email address is down there for you. If you want to send me an email and say, I'd love to be involved in the next Friday School of Sales. We run those every month. And so there's always something going on in our world. But I've also started LinkedIn groups where we actually have salespeople and sales managers getting involved in those groups, and they're commenting and putting ideas in there. Building communities. Have a think about that for you right now. How can you build your own community that actually has a nice big umbrella that takes in people that have a similar interest? Here's your toolbox point for this one. Asking for referrals and the email handshake. Now, the email handshake is simply when someone copies the person in and says, hey, I know Kate and she's fantastic and she does this for our business. You should really use Kate in your service. So then you're introduced, they're in the CC as well. And all of a sudden you've got the opportunity now, maybe give them the afternoon to respond. But the next day I'd be jumping on the email saying, hey, good to meet you. I'd love to have a conversation. Can we jump on a Zoom call? It's a really nice way of getting introduced. It's also not a threatening way for the person to introduce you. The referrer feels better too, because they're not necessarily going to make a phone call or talk to the person, just doing it nice and subtly. Number 4 is connecting and nurturing. We have got used to LinkedIn Sales Navigator. The LinkedIn traffic is going berserk. Someone said to me the other day, 6 to 7 times as much traffic going through LinkedIn this year as compared to last year. Don't quote me on it. I haven't got any evidence for that. They just told me that third hand, and they were very involved in LinkedIn. But the point I'm making is simply this, is that we've got to really get good at 2 things: prolific and provocative content. Good friend of mine, Chad Barr, he runs a business and it's all about creating digital global empires. I interviewed Chad for my new selling program a little while ago, and he said you've got to get prolific with what you're doing in your posting, but also make it provocative. In other words, not vanilla. Give it a bit of Neapolitan in terms of the way that you present the idea. Be contrarian. Pitch something that might get people going. The whole idea is being a bit provocative so that you're getting people involved in your world. But you can see it by the traffic. The prolific to some people will mean posting multiple times a day. In my world, with what I do, it's posting a video on Monday, a video on Friday, and I'll post some other content between the other days of Tuesday through Thursday, whether it be a quote, whether it be a posting of an article. But I'm trying to have something out there most days. Now, that by some people's standards is a lot. From other people's standards, it's not much at all. So I'll leave that with you. But the whole idea of how do you become prolific and provocative? My question here for your toolbox is building a nurture sequence behind that. Now, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I've certainly had a lot of people in Sales Navigator in recent times who have sent me a LinkedIn contact and a let's connect, everything else. And then they're getting this long-winded conversation about what they do and how it'd be wonderful to be in alliance together. And you're sitting there going, well, back off. We haven't had even our first date yet, and you're asking me to marry you. I mean, I just want time, please. So what we need to do is we need to build a nurture sequence. And that is we connect the first time, we may send them an ebook, we may invite them to a webinar, but we got to go slowly before we can earn the right to ask for their business. I think people walk back a million miles as soon as they get that selling message from someone saying, hey, I'd love to do business with you. Can you give me a lead? Can I help you? And it tends to be coming from overseas in terms of some of those messages about whether it be SEO, whether it be websites, or whatever else. And you tend to steer clear of those messages because you go, I'm not so sure I want to get this conversation. If you're going to build a nurture sequence, one thing in mind. How do I move people from a LinkedIn or a Facebook Live into my email database? How do I get them into a Zoho, or how do I get them into an Infusion software, whatever you're using, to be able to have that conversation at my speed, to be able to invite them into my world so they can experience what I do, but they're actually part of the IP of my business and they're part of my community. And I think that's a key piece, is how do we actually move people across, a nurture sequence. Number 5 is experiences, customer experiences over not just sales calls. I think we're in a place now where the customer experience, when we get face-to-face, and some people in this call may already be there, of course, is so much of a moment of truth, a golden moment of truth than it ever has been. It's not just a sales call. And I give sales teams a hard time about this all the time, because I see salespeople knocking on doors. And what are they doing? A regular call cycle, talking to people about stuff that is not always that relevant to the buyer right there and then, but it's because they're on a call cycle, 30, 60, 90 days, I just turn up. Those days are gone. And I think that's going to continue to disappear. There's a great book out there, if you want to copy this one down, The Experience Economy, written by Pine and Gilmore. It was written over 20 years ago. I picked this book up. I picked it out of my library a little while ago, and I thought, this is so important right now. What they talk about in this book are things like our experiences at retail and business to business. And they quote the example of Starbucks, because back 20 years ago, it was a big deal in terms of the way that the Starbucks philosophy was and the way they engage people. And they talked about the way that, it was the first business in that setting, so that you can go and sit there in an armchair, read the paper, have a cup of coffee, not feel like you're being pushed out the door. The first company to actually say, hey, Brad, your coffee's ready. Never before was that done. So there's some nice little examples in this book. I'd recommend grabbing a copy. It'll probably cost you $20 and you can get it in soft cover these days. But The Experience Economy, all about how we create customer experiences. Now, here's my point here in the toolbox. My point is that I think we've got to map out our game day process, because people's time is going to be an absolute premium. Because people are not going to want to necessarily be catching up with us face to face unless they have to, unless you can value add. Salespeople, people in business who are selling in this new world, are going to have to map out a sales process that's relevant, that is talking the language of your buyer, that's well prepared and ready to go, but looking conversational. So in other words, I believe in this idea of prepared spontaneity. We look like we are spontaneously answering the questions of our buyer, talking to our client, but what's really going on is that we have pre-prepared our whole presentation, and we're moving in the direction of where the buyer takes us by being that nimble, flexible salesperson who can be absolutely present with that buyer rather than just reading from a script. But I'm surprised the number of people I come across in my world who don't have a sales process, that don't have prepared questions they've at least thought about, prepared sound bites, messaging, things like that, building a great sales process for game day. Number 6 is this one, and here's my opportunity to talk about victory for a second. Number 6 is an autonomous and mobile sales team. I think we've got used to this new virtual world and operating from home. I mean, I know there's been surveys done about this in recent times where people are saying, hey, I really like working from home. Do I have to go back to the office? And I'm wondering what's going to happen to commercial real estate out there. I've got an office suite in St Kilda Road that I've been to once since March. I have a whole studio set up here now. I can do all webinars, seminars. I can run whiteboards, flip charts, the whole bit. And I'm going, hang on, this is not a bad idea. It's all well lit. It didn't cost a fortune. Do I really want to go bumper to bumper to go into the office, to have to pay to have my office, all the outgoings, the body corporate, etc.? It's something I'm thinking about. But here's where it really, the rubber hits the road in terms of what we're talking about. Flexible with method, heavy on measurement. As a business owner, if you have people working for you and they are working from home, you have to think about, how do I measure that? How do I get good at the measurements, the quantifiables? Now, here's my opportunity to sell victory, and no one knows I was doing this today. Kate doesn't know, Wendy doesn't know. So this is not for them. This is just because I love the victory product. But here's a perfect offering. You've got a virtual world where people have got used to operating from home. Do they all have to go to the office to be able to be effective? I'm going to say categorically, no, of course they don't. Now, it may be worthwhile to go in once, twice a week as a team to connect and everything else, but what a beautiful product Victory Lounges is. You can actually go there, do your stuff, get a beautiful cappuccino, go into a meeting room, the whole bit, it's all there. And I've already referred a couple of people to Wendy about this idea that, do you need to have your own office? Do you need to have these state branch offices for these big corporates? And I think that's going to be up for grabs. Talking to a sales manager last week, they were just saying, no, I think we could actually get to a point of maybe a Tuesday and Friday. The guys come in, the rest of the time, I don't want to see them. Let them go out and do it. I'll buy a membership and they can just go to a place. So what does that mean? It means that we're thinking about what does our ideal working week look like. Can it be different to what we're used to? Of course it can. Can we learn, take some of the silver lining out of all this and actually use it to an extent that we build a new perfect week, that we build a new ideal setting? As I said before, virtual servicing from home, if you're well set up and you're able to do it, has been fabulous for a lot of people to be able to get through those client contact conversations without having to go to work, without having to go to the client. Well, the same thing applies in terms of our selling in our own business. Would it be more beneficial to have a membership or to go to a virtual, go to a hub and actually have an ability to get some work done and stick your power into the PowerPoint and get some stuff done on your computer and then go back home and then go to the client? I think it's a virtual world and a mobile world. The thing is, being autonomous creates another set of issues around how we manage that. But I think that this is something we should be all thinking about moving forward. Number 7, 2 to go, and then we're done. Number 7 is sharpening your message of competitive uniqueness. Now, I really believe that we've got to be clear on our competitive advantage going into the market. Our competitive advantage has always been really important in terms of what our messaging is. I talk about 2 things: who's your ideal client and what's your message of uniqueness. I'll talk about those for a second. But if you haven't sharpened up your message or you haven't got a strong message right now, I'm going to say you've got to do it. It's got to go in the toolbox. You've got to be able to differentiate yourself from other people. You need to be able to talk to the number one question in sales. If you've got a pen there, you want to make a note of the number one question in sales, here it is. Out of all the vendors available to me right now, why should I buy from you? It'll be the number one question moving forward. It always has been. It always will be. Out of the vendors available to me right now as a buyer, why on earth should I be buying from you? Now, every sales team I work with, I drill and rehearse and role play the answer to this question. And I do this one-on-one also with my coaching. The point I'm making is you've got to be clear on exactly what you're offering. What is it that makes you different from anyone else? My brand, Trusted Advisor Selling, is all about being a trusted advisor and a sounding board to sales teams, business owners, and solo operators. So, I have a brand and I can back that up with the idea of a model that supports that. But if you're a service provider, are you getting caught up in a noisy market? Or are you able to develop something that's truly yours, something that separates you totally from anyone else? There's the number one question in sales, just in case you wanted to get it down. So how do we actually build this message to market? 2 pieces to it. One, we've got to have an umbrella statement so we can say in one quick line what we do. It's like, in some ways, it's like an elevator pitch, but I don't like the words elevator pitch. But it's a one-line statement about how you're different. Number 2 is you've got to build these pillars of uniqueness behind it that say that these are the 3 main areas that we're different from anyone else. And there's a rule that goes with this, and the rule is simply this: the so what factor. In other words, so what? Are you absolutely unique or not? And a lot of people are not that unique. So you have to go deeper and deeper to develop that process to come up with something that's purely unique about what you do. So in terms of the toolbox, number 7 is sharpening your message of uniqueness to market. And that's about how you actually go to market with a message that really is different from anyone else and clearly states how you want to be perceived in the market. So this is a key piece in terms of developing your uniqueness. Now, here's another opportunity. I can see we've got at least another 8 to 10 minutes. So before I go to my last piece today in terms of the 8th different area of differentiation in terms of this new market, have we got any other questions or thoughts or things that people want to ask as we're going along? I'm looking at some feedback here.
We do. We have a couple of questions in the question and answer section. If you're happy to answer them now.
Oh, of course, Kate.
I have one from Amanda. She says, how can salespeople overcome competition's tendency to just drop prices in a tough market, although you've been focusing on selling the value instead of price?
Yeah, my first statement I make to anyone who tries to commoditize my offering in the market, because every one of us gets the same situation, is
Mhm.
that people want to commoditize what we do, is I'll always say something like this, Amanda, which is, in any market, there is always a low-cost producer. In any market, there is always a cheaper alternative available. By the way, don't underestimate the power of the word cheap.
Mm.
I would accentuate that. I was talking to a client in Geelong a little while back, and they said, "Hey, we're interested in doing some training with it, but we're not used to investing as much in our training. We're using the local TAFE." I just simply looked at the person and said, "You're using the TAFE. Okay, tell me, how's that working for you?" And they said, "Well, that's the reason why we're talking to you, because it's not working for us." And I said, "Listen, there's always going to be a cheaper alternative." And I hit the word cheap really hard. Guess what? They said, "Hey, hang on, you're probably right. We probably do need to spend a little more." And so you negotiate. But the point is that as premium service, there's always room for a premium service in any market. And I think that people are actually, in this trusting world of referrals, introductions, they will spend a little more in any of those markets if they believe that you're the right person. So yes, my conversation has been about value and price, value versus price, because that's my whole philosophy. But I think it is important to put doubt in the buyer's mind that what you pay for might be what you get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all kind of reflect on that personally as well, just in the things that we buy day to day. I have another question here. Is it still okay to pay a commission for a referral in the current marketplace for B2B services? Also based on fact that order form with new client, that commission may be paid to person that referred them.
Yeah, great question. Great question. In the financial services world, this has been done for years and years and years, of course. But I also deal with trucking industry, mobile phone industry, printing and stationery. There are opportunities to be able to have a revenue stream or a commission, or I find that most people actually don't even want anything, to be honest with you. But you can actually set that up as an arrangement. And there's certain people who would be on a 10%, 20%, whatever it is, introduce a spotter's fee, if you like. I don't think that unless it's okay inside your industry to do that, which is a different question from what I'm answering, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to actually give someone part of that first profit you're making out of that new relationship and that new order. Let's face it, it's incremental business to you wouldn't have got. So to me, if someone's introduced me to someone and that's a $10,000 assignment, I wouldn't have got that without an introduction. So I'm happy to pay a little extra and give that to the person. Here's what I do, by the way. I don't tend to actually give them money. They actually go, I don't want money. What do? I take them to lunch at the Stokehouse, and they kind of like that, So you go and spend $300-400 on a beautiful lunch. They reckon you're fantastic. It's cost you less than what it does in a referral fee, and what a great way to develop rapport. So yeah, that's the way I do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that continuation of referrals, goes on. Now, I think that's it for questions.
All right. I've got the last little piece to go. Kate, if you want me to get back on it.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Ripper. All right. Here's my last little piece for today to think about in terms of these distinctions. I want to talk about this idea in this last piece around how do we develop the right culture. Just before I get to that, because I always forget to do this, and Kate, you wanted me to make resources available today. I do have an ebook on the 17 ways that trusted advisors create more clients, more referrals, more repeat business. There's my email address. There is no hook to this. There is no upsell to this. There is no, hey, you're going to be caught in my world forever for this. I just want to help. So if you want to send me an email, say, I'd love a copy of the ebook. Let's connect. And then I can, if you wanted to also get involved in the Friday School of Sales, I'm happy to invite you along and register you. Normally $65, but I'm happy to give it to you today. So reach out to me if you'd like to and grab that ebook. All right, here's my last point today, and that is an all-in single enterprise sales culture. So what do I mean by that? Well, I think that all businesses are going to have to get really, really good at being a magnetic business to market. I made this point to Kate before we started. But sorry, I don't know if we were talking. I think I was talking about it on the last Zoom call. But this idea of this cafe that a friend of mine went to, and they said the level of service was terrible and everything else. And I said, how can you be in this environment? And this was in New South Wales, and not be a magnetic business? You have to be. So in other words, We have to build a single enterprise sales culture where everyone understands that they are in the business of selling. If we're talking about the new world of sales, for us to say that's the sales team's responsibility, that's that department, boy, that is narrow thinking. We're going to have to get everyone on board with the same way of thinking. In other words, we are having to be a company that has moments of truth where we actually, everything that happens in our business is an individual moment of truth, to be able to get people involved in our world, the way we greet, the way that we answer the phone, the way that we get back to people within, in the old days of Bob Answer with budget rent a car, 3 rings, all that sort of stuff. All the things we know, but we just don't always do. We have to be a magnetic business, have a great sales culture to what we do. So the question around that is how are you doing that? And here's an idea for you. Are you selling based on the values of your business? Because I think that a lot of businesses are actually overlooking this right now. What a great place to go to when you're talking about being of service to people and to connect with people and not just be selling to people, but walking that fine line. Why wouldn't you be involving people in the values that are in your business? In other words, promoting the values in your business. So when I work internally with a company, I'll often get them into a huddle and we'll work out the values, behaviors, the measurements, and the feedback in terms of developing their culture. And we develop a whole culture document for that sales team or that company. But what I also recommend to them is when they've got it established, go to market with it. Talk about it from the sales point of view. Talk about it on the phone. Talk about it in your email, on the website. I think this is a really attractive thing right now, how to have a conversation around the values in your business and why that's important to your buyer. I think the buyer will be very responsive to that. So the last point today is your sales culture. In other words, what culture do you want to develop in your business? If you have multiple people in your business, how are you developing a sales culture that's magnetic, that is welcoming of people? Like the barbershop down in Hampton Street just yesterday, I heard them on the radio. They said that they're ringing everyone back. They're not expecting people to wait out on the curb to get their hair cut. And to kind of tell you, there's probably 20 blokes out there all with looking pretty scruffy who are sort of going, I don't need to have a haircut. Well, they've actually gone to the next stage and say, I value this person's business. Thank you for coming back today. And the woman was so effervescent. I think she was actually on the news last night. So effervescent, so excited about having people back. And I thought, that's what we've got to do. We've got to be able to engage people and make them feel really important about being involved in our business and be responsive and be proactive. These are key things that, it's not necessarily in sales process that we talk about. It's just about being good to each other. So can we learn from where we've been in the past? Absolutely. Can we use it in our sales moving forward? Absolutely. It's about thinking differently. Hey, I hope you've really enjoyed these ideas. There were 8 specific ideas around selling in the new world. I know that my time is up right now in terms of what I was given. So I want to be respectful in terms of time. But Kate, I'm here at your service. So I'm happy to take any questions or have any conversation. Here to stay as long as you want me to. But I am mindful of the fact that that's what you promised. That's all.
Perfect. Well, I would love to open up for a couple of questions. We've got about 5 minutes. So please, once again, include them in the Q&A box or the chat box. I do have a question straight off the bat from Caroline. She says, people say one should advertise on Facebook, yet one is limited on what Facebook will allow. So example, it's not too descriptive. What has been your client's experience on using Facebook?
Oh, I have a lot of clients who've used it, and a lot of people who are using it in terms of selling services with Facebook Live right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're working ads off the back of Facebook Live in terms of doing seminars and things. So I certainly talked to a lot of people in that world. LinkedIn and Facebook are certainly the two that I think are out there. Facebook more to the personal market, LinkedIn to the business market. I don't want to be I don't want to profess I'm an expert. I do what I do in terms of creating people in my nurture sequence. What's more important to me is then what I have in terms of that relationship with them once they come into my funnel, to then develop the conversation, referrals and introductions off the back of that. But in terms of building a funnel, absolutely, there needs to be a whole range of things in the buffet. The
Yeah.
buffet includes email handshakes, referrals, networking, and let's face it, I know with my conversation with Wendy in the past with regard to the Melbourne Business Network, that some of those events are virtual too, and so that's going to continue as well. You want to get involved in that. Speaking, like I'm doing today, is a way of creating business. You probably need at least a half a dozen little multiple streams of ways of people coming into your world, into your funnel. So maybe I'll go broad and cover it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also just good for SEO as well, is to kind of have your finger in so many pies and be available via different streams. Once again, if anyone has any other questions, you can also raise your hand. I have one from Wendy. All right, Wendy, you're not on mute. Oh, perfect.
All righty. Brad, I just really wanted to say thank you so much for this. I think that in times of stress, in significantly challenging markets, I think that times people forget just to take a moment, breathe, and refocus. And what I've always enjoyed about your sessions is that what you talk about are what people actually have control of now. They can implement now. They don't have to go and purchase some highfalutin CRM system or engage in a massive SEO or advertising campaign or whatever. It's all within people's control. It's the message that they're sharing with the market, and it's also about who it is they're targeting. And I think that, and especially these markets, like we find ourselves in now, people actually want to help. So if you've helped somebody, or there's clients, even historically people you've helped, go to them and ask for referrals. Be specific, because people do want to help, and they, had great success and with you previously, so they want it again. So I just really wanted to kind of do it, a massive thank you for what you've shared today.
Oh, you're more than welcome. You know that I'm here at your service. The whole thing, Wendy, about this is that you're right. We've got to move from can't control to can to control to must control. So I always say to people, draw 3 columns on a piece of paper, put down the things you can't control and get those on a piece of paper and actually just say, I'm not going to focus on that. Move to your middle column and say can control, and then look at that last column and highlight those 3 or 4 things that you really must do and must control to keep the mindset right. Because one of the things we didn't have time to spend a lot of time on today is to have that positive, resilient mindset and understand that we've got to have perspective around this stuff. Perspective is about the fact that people have gone through this journey, and how do we help and reach out to each other. And that's what I think one of the beautiful things about this year is the ability to actually look out for each other, say g'day to someone in the street or the local cafe. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I would love for you to plug away, Brad, if you don't mind. Before you do, though, please, everyone, pop in your LinkedIn details, because I will send a follow-up email with all of Brad's details as well, so you can get in contact with him. I know someone has put his email in the chat box, but I'll send that again through as well. But yeah, please plug away. Where can we find you? What's news with you at the moment?
Okay, well, the first thing is grab the ebook, and I thank you, Wendy, for saying that you love the ebook. That's great. So let's just do that. Send me an email, brad@bradtonini.com, and I'll get the ebook back to you. And there's no hook attached to that. Just have a read of it and see what you think. The other thing is that I do run a Friday School of Sales every month, and I have members, and every now and then I have some guests, and I'm happy to make some guest spots available for people on this call today. So if you'd like an invitation to come to my Friday School of Sales. It happens on a Friday morning, and it goes for around about an hour, and we have different topics each month. I will pop you into an invitation so that you can become part of that. If you don't want to get involved, if you want to sit there on mute, you want to be in your jammies, having a piece of toast, put yourself on mute, take your video off. I don't care. But you'll find there's at least 30 to 50 people on that call, and they're really, proactive people asking questions about selling right now, and either in businesses or salespeople. And the other thing is, of course, if you want to go to my website, bradtonini.com, and I offer coaching services one-on-one for salespeople and business owners. And a lot of people are really wanting to discuss a whole range of different stuff right now, which is fine. It's a confidential conversation. We do it virtually, of course. And then if you've got a team and you want to get them involved in terms of the virtual world, drop me a note again, and we can talk about how I can run a session for your sales team or your team internally about developing the right culture owner and a magnetic business. There you go, Kate.
Beautiful. What a spiel. That was fabulous. Well, thank you so much again, Brad. That was such an informative session. And I think anyone would be crazy not to take you up on that offer. So guys, thank you once again for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you all online again soon.